Welcome to the Metabolic Link, a medical and science-focused podcast that explores the common thread of metabolism in health and disease. This is where science meets society. Hi, and welcome back to another episode of the Metabolic Link. I'm Dr. Angela Poff, and I'm a metabolic therapy researcher and co-founder of Metabolic Health Initiative, a medical education company dedicated exclusively to providing evidence-based education on metabolic health and therapies. On today's episode, we're sharing an intimate interview with Lily Nichols that was filmed this year at Metabolic Health Summit. Lily is a registered dietitian nutritionist, a certified diabetes educator, a researcher, and an author with a passion for evidence-based nutrition. Her work is known for being research-focused, thorough, and sensible. She's founder of the Institute for Prenatal Nutrition, co-founder of the Women's Health Nutrition Academy, and the author of 3 books: Real Food for Fertility, Real Food for Pregnancy, and Real Food for Gestational Diabetes. She'll also be joining us on our medical education platform, the Metabolic Initiative, for a live Q&A session coming up on June 12th. We'll be sure to include a link in the show description so that you can register. Before we dive in, I want to say a special thank you to our sponsors. Please know that these partners help us continue to provide you with free, quality content. So when you listen to these ads and support these brands, you're also supporting everything we do here at the Metabolic Link. Genova Connect is one of our incredible sponsors for this episode. Genova Connect, powered by Genova Diagnostics, offers simple, at-home, advanced lab testing that's grounded in research and takes the guesswork out of understanding your health. Genova's been pioneering advanced health testing for over 3 decades, and they have a wide array of innovative testing options, including tests like Metabolomics Plus, which is a comprehensive nutritional test that looks at an individual's need for over 125 markers, including antioxidants, vitamins, minerals, amino acids, fatty acids, and it even assesses for toxic exposures. Or the comprehensive gut test, which provides valuable insight into digestive function, intestinal inflammation, and the intestinal microbiome. These are just 2 of the many options that they have available to gain in-depth insight into your nutritional status, immune function, hormone and gut health, and more. Genova Connect is offering you 15% off of any of their test kits when you use the code MetabolicLink at gdx.net/themetaboliclink. Element is also a sponsor of this episode. Element is a zero-sugar electrolyte drink mix, free of artificial colors and containing only clean ingredients. Element has been my go-to electrolyte of choice for several years now, and I have never looked back. I use it regularly. I find it to be particularly helpful when I'm eating a low-carbohydrate or ketogenic diet, or when I'm fasting. They have a ton of great flavors. My personal favorites are probably the raspberry salt or the grapefruit salt. And they also just launched Element Sparkling, which are absolutely delicious electrolyte sparkling waters. Element is offering an exclusive deal to our listeners. By using our link, you'll get a free Element sample pack with any drink mix purchase when you visit drinklmnt.com/metaboliclink. This episode is also sponsored by Timeline, a Swiss-based life science company and global leader in urolithin A research. Mitochondria, our cells' energy producers, play a key influence in how we age. However, as the years pass, mitochondrial efficiency naturally declines, representing a large gap in the quality of life that we expect in our later years and what we actually experience. Urolithin A is a powerful postbiotic that is nearly impossible to get from your diet alone. MitoPure by Timeline Nutrition is the first product to offer a precise dose of urolithin A to support your mitochondrial function, increase cellular energy, and improve strength and endurance. MitoPure is clinically shown to support mitochondrial function by triggering the body's natural process for removing and rebuilding damaged mitochondria, a process called mitophagy. Timeline was one of our incredible partners at Metabolic Health Summit this year, and they're offering our listeners 10% off your first order of MitoPure. Go to timeline.com/metaboliclink and use the code MetabolicLink to get 10% off your order. That's www.metabolic link. And now we hope you enjoyed this interview with Lily.
My name's Lily Nichols. I'm a registered dietitian, and most of my work centers around nutrition for women in the childbearing years, so preconception through pregnancy and postpartum. It was a little bit by accident, to be honest. Some job opportunities came my way in the gestational diabetes space pretty early on, and it was there that I learned that the metabolic health of children really has its origins back to prenatal. So I learned that women who have poorly controlled blood sugar, for example, can face upwards of like a 6 to 19-fold increased risk of developing type 2 diabetes or obesity, sometimes by the time they're teenagers. So if we can improve mother's health during pregnancy, if we can improve her blood sugar control, we can greatly reduce the risk that these children will also face those issues later in life. I get a lot of questions around how long you should start preparing for pregnancy in advance, especially if you have that metabolic health in mind for yourself and your child. I mean, it's not just preventing metabolic issues for your child later on. It's also like, what is your experience of pregnancy going to be? Are you going to face pregnancy complications? And we can also reduce the risk of that by optimizing mom's metabolic health preconception. So it's arguable, like exactly how long that window should be. At a minimum, I would say 3 to 6 months, because if you go back to like the full development of an egg from the time that it's like an immature follicle, ovarian follicle, you're going back upwards of like 8 months. But the closer and closer you get to the time at which that egg is actually released at ovulation and thus can be, fertilized and you conceive, it really is that 3 to 6 months window in advance. And that also, I'm not talking about this in my talk, but that also carries over to dad's health too, because the full cycle of producing sperm is like over 70 days. So you do want to have that at least 3-month window for dad too, because that actually influences the development of the placenta, for example, and also like the genetic quality. So like you can reduce the chance that there will be an early pregnancy loss due to chromosomal abnormalities if mom and dad's health is really dialed in preconception. Metabolic health is really vital to fertility as a whole, because when we look at the concentration of mitochondria in different cells, the egg cell has the highest concentration of mitochondria by far of any other cells in the human body. And the whole process of like early, like from conception to the development of the embryo to the development of the placenta, called placentation, that whole process is really metabolically intense. So if you don't have strong mitochondrial function in that egg cell, you're very likely to have some issues come up with all of those very sensitive stages. And I think people don't realize, but most of our biggest issues with pregnancy, whether it is like tragically a pregnancy loss or if it's a pregnancy complication later on, it has to do with how healthy that egg cell and embryo was to begin with. When the embryo is not healthy, you're more likely to have a pregnancy loss. Maybe the embryo is just healthy enough, but maybe the placenta doesn't form properly, and that can predispose you to other complications later on, like preeclampsia or gestational diabetes or other issues. So it's really vital. So nutrition plays a big role in egg quality as well as sperm quality, and a lot of that comes down to mitochondrial function ultimately. The list of nutrients that's involved in mitochondrial function is like, it's like dozens and dozens of nutrients, many different micronutrients, your vitamins and minerals, but also a lot of amino acids play a role in mitochondrial health. So how well is that egg cell and that embryo, like how well is it able to produce energy ultimately? So you need a number of B vitamins to pull off that process. You need certain antioxidants like CoQ10. You need amino acids like L-carnitine. So there's a lot at play, and ultimately that comes down to, how are you going to receive those nutrients? Sure, supplements are always an option, but basing your diet around whole nutrient-dense foods really goes a long way at helping you meet all of those different nutrient needs, because not all those things are found in like a prenatal vitamin, for example. So beyond the micronutrients, when you start looking at supporting metabolic health, blood sugar balance is absolutely huge. That is actually the first place that I usually focus on with both men and women for preconception. If your glucose levels are too high consistently, and that of course usually means that your insulin levels are also pretty consistently too high, you have just an array of metabolic issues that start to pop up. So the major cause, for example, of anovulation, of no longer ovulating or not ovulating on a consistent, regular basis, is polycystic ovarian syndrome, or PCOS. And at least 70% of PCOS cases have hyperinsulinemia. And the best way to address that, really, I mean, people argue for the medications, they have their place, but really you have to start with food. So we can do a lot. I mean, we can increase our protein intake. That goes a long way. You can work on like how you're timing your meals, how you're taking in your nutrients throughout the day. Like, so are you taking in most of your energy in the morning or most of your energy in the evening? Are you eating super late at night? Are you, skipping breakfast and not eating until 2 p.m.? What's your carbohydrate intake like? What's your carbohydrate quality? What types of fat are you consuming? All of those things end up playing a role in how your body regulates your glucose levels and insulin levels, and ultimately your level of insulin resistance. So I think it comes down to looking at how our recommended dietary allowances were set, whether those are accurate, how those can be improved. If you trust that, we're supposed to get 45 to 65% of our calories from carbohydrates, and you can't imagine that it would ever be healthy for somebody to eat below that, you're going to have a hard time getting on board with everything we're talking about here. So I think it takes a little, definitely education and like re-education. And there's an uncomfortable process, I think, of unlearning there. You have to have clinicians who are open to it. Yeah, so I think for clinicians to be open to new information, they need to see the research behind it. I think that's the main barrier. And I think people will be surprised. A lot of busy clinicians just don't have time to look at the research. So I think they'd actually be surprised how much data there actually is in this field, not just with metabolic health, mitochondrial health, but like low carb diets, for example. There's quite a bit of research out there. They just might not know where to look for it. So to have a place to go where you have talks from professionals presenting and explaining that research, so you don't have to spend, dozens of hours on PubMed looking for it for yourself, I think that's really valuable.
Do you love learning about metabolic health? So do we. It's why we created the Metabolic Initiative, an online educational platform providing evidence-based education on metabolic health and therapies for healthcare professionals and the general public. By joining the Metabolic Initiative, you'll gain access to hundreds of expert lectures, interviews, panel discussions, and even private episodes of the Metabolic Link. CMEs are available. Go to metabolicinitiative.com to get started. And as always, thank you for listening to the Metabolic Link.
Yeah, so in the women's health space, I hope that there is a shift in how clinicians are approaching, particularly infertility. I just want to call out one. Right now, as it stands, most of the emphasis is just on getting couples pregnant as quickly as possible and not really investigating what is the underlying issue that's preventing this couple from conceiving in a time frame that we'd expect to be reasonable, or helping them conceive and actually sustain that pregnancy. Because sometimes you have, recurrent pregnancy loss. And a lot of times when you start looking under the hood, you discover that there's some metabolic abnormalities going on, which often don't even necessarily need like a prescription medication to fix. It often really requires an overhaul of dietary and lifestyle choices. So I would hope that there is more acknowledgement of the importance of metabolic health in infertility, And I would hope that we look beyond just getting couples pregnant as quickly as possible through medications and assisted reproductive technology, and think about how can we optimize egg and sperm quality and the metabolic health of the parents so we can optimize the metabolic health of that child as well. Like, we have to look intergenerationally, in my opinion. Infertility is it's a very sensitive subject. What I tend to see is, and maybe this is just the clientele that I tend to work with, but people get overly hard on themselves for thinking that everything is their fault necessarily. So there's like a fine balance between acknowledging the things you have control over and taking, every step that's reasonable for your, lifestyle and income and all the things to optimize that, but also to understand that not everything is within your control. So, I'm about really stacking the deck in your favor. But I think the way in which we communicate the information has to be really careful, so people don't get down on themselves and start blaming themselves for things that aren't working out. Sometimes you do need medical intervention for certain issues. Not everything is fixed with the nutrition and lifestyle. So we have to be honest about that part as well. We want to empower and uplift and improve people's lifestyles, while also acknowledging that sometimes you do need some assistance, and that's okay. I think the conversation around metabolic health is often missing in the fertility space among like OBGYNs, reproductive medicine specialists. They simply don't have the training in the area. And I think if they did take some time to look at, for example, most of the research around egg quality is done in couples who are pursuing IVF, because other than surrogate markers of egg quality, like biomarkers like AMH, really the only way to like assess egg quality is like with an egg retrieval, right? They can look at the quality of the egg. They can look at, post IVF, the quality of the embryo. And there's a number of studies looking at diet and lifestyle leading up to IVF, or supplementation of specific nutrients, often nutrients that improve mitochondrial function, leading up to IVF and improved outcomes. So I think if they were aware of that research, they would maybe be more open to considering that. At the end of the day, though, IVF and assisted reproductive technology is a huge moneymaker. And so there has to be a financial incentive for them to do it as well. Either they operate from a place of wanting to do the best for their patients and they want to like optimize their success with each IVF cycle, or they just want to run their clients through as many IVF cycles as possible because that's money in the bank. I mean, I can't speak to every clinician, but I certainly think that can play a role in openness to receiving this information. I think some of the most powerful experiences I've had with clients have been in those who have had gestational diabetes in a previous pregnancy, who maybe didn't have the best outcome from that pregnancy, and then they seek out my work, my writing, my help in between, and really work on their metabolic health leading up to that pregnancy, their subsequent pregnancy. And I've had cases where, odds are stacked against you that if you had gestational diabetes one pregnancy, it's like assumed you're going to have it the next time. And I've had a number of cases where they actually haven't developed gestational diabetes the subsequent time, or if they do develop it, maybe they don't need insulin or blood sugar lowering medication. It's just much easier for them to manage. And that is huge, because any of the adverse effects of elevated or gestational diabetes in pregnancy really have to do with where your blood sugar levels are at. So regardless of if there's like a mark on your chart for you're positive for gestational diabetes or not, it's your blood sugar levels that matter. So if you're able to keep those within range, significantly improved outcomes. So I've had clients who maybe first pregnancy, they didn't get great advice for their gestational diabetes. They weren't really able to keep their blood sugar under control that well, not at any fault of their own, but because the advice they were given was so bad. So they face a lot of the typical issues. So, baby is born larger than average. Maybe there's some breathing issues at birth, something like that. And then next round, it's like, oh, I got this dialed in. I have like 7-pound baby. It was like easier pregnancy. Weight loss postpartum is easier. Breastfeeding is easier. Postpartum recovery is easier. You're just setting them up for really just better health for their whole life, but also for their children and their families. I mean, they carry over the dietary things they learn in their pregnancy for blood sugar management, you carry over for the rest of your life, and it changes how you feed your family too. So, while I'm all about the in utero, imprinting that happens with metabolic health, it's also about like, what are you doing long term? What is your family eating on a daily basis? And it's nice to see when that trickles out to other family members.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Metabolic Link. If you want the opportunity to connect with Lily and ask her questions directly, please join us for an upcoming live Q&A on our medical education platform, the Metabolic Initiative. It's going to be happening on June 12th at 8 a.m. Pacific, 11 Eastern. Sign up for the session by visiting membership.metabolicinitiative.com/Lily. Your first 7 days are free, and you can even access exclusive ad-free podcast episodes and even earn CMEs for listening. If you like this episode, please be sure to leave us a review, share it, or drop us a comment. Thank you for tuning in.